each of the video witnesses were clear that when asked why did they start taping was because of the behavior of the BART officers. Each of them were clear that what prompted them to tape was not the behavior of Oscar and his friends, but what made them roll the tape were the actions of principally Tony Perrone, who, according to all of them, was overly aggressive from the beginning. It was New Year's. There was a lot of noise on the train already. Evidently, Tony Perrone's noise was more impactful on them than the noise of all the New Year's revelers. He came banging on the windows. He came cussing at the passengers. He came declaring this to be his train and he wants you to get your rear end off the train. So the reality was that it were the actions of Tony Perrone that excited the interest of everyone that took video. Interestingly enough, some of the videographers had compassion for the police. Mr. Liu seemed to have a hard time believing that the police were not justified in handling Oscar and his friends the way that they were handled. Though I think he testified better in this record than he did at the preliminary hearing in that regard, in that they captured his voice cussing when he saw what the police were doing to Oscar and his friends. So the DA asked him, "Is that your voice?" "Yes, that's my voice." "Well, why did you do that?" Some may recall in the prior hearing that Mr. Liu kind of expressed his desire to videotape that he was just an interested photographer. That was his language. I saw something interesting to capture. Which is fine if you're just a photographer. I do photography, and every now and then I drive or ride and see something. Brent, stop. Take a picture of that flower. Stop. Take a picture of that building. Stop. Take a picture of that UFO. Whatever. An interested photographer will do that. Now, Mr. Liu attempted to display himself as being simply an interested photographer, but it turned out that when he heard Perrone, he not only videotaped, that man stood up on top of a chair in the BART train. Pardon me, Pastor. I'm sorry. But the man jumped on top of a chair because it was so disturbing to him what he was hearing from Anthony Perrone. And when he looked at Perrone brutalizing Oscar and Michael Greer, he started cussing. So the DA asked, "Well, why?" See, that now you're taking it out of, "I'm just an interested photographer,"
Correct.
into the fact I'm witnessing something that should not happen. So that even when Raines asked him, were they resisting? He said, "Well, I guess they didn't want to sit down." Though I'm not familiar that not sitting down is a charge called resisting arrest. Especially when the videotape clearly showed that Oscar didn't stand up until Tony Perrone slammed Michael Greer. And since Oscar was next in line, he stood up in defense of himself and to talk with him. So this is all to say that what Mr. Raines was after, he got some of. The only thing that he got in his favor is his primary objective, by the way, and that was to get the witnesses to say what they thought Messerly looked like after the shooting. So when the witnesses all said, all but one, all but Jamil, said that he looked confused or dumbfounded. Actually, that may come up in testimony because I think one of them said he looks just like he looks right now. Maybe we should contact the DA and let him know that that was actually said. Evidently, Mr. Messerly is good at keeping a good poker face. You don't know, by the way, what a murderer looks like at face. or after they commit the crime. There's no facial expression that says, I am a murderer. There is no particular facial expression that proves the intent or lack of intent of an action of a crime of murder. There is no particular facial expression. I hope the DA will take that on. Because the defense desire will be, and he's already said it, that he's going to bring in psychologists that deal with police use of force issues. They're going to say things like this. I just read this. This is a report from Cincinnati Dayton Daily News by Lynn Holsey. Cincinnati tops list of police killings. And it is here that you find some of the argument that police offer for themselves when they murder people. It says, nationally, police killed an average of 373 criminal suspects a year between 1976 and 1998, according to the U.S. Department of Justice report on justifiable homicides by police. Most often, these were white males, the shooter. But black males, the victims. The primary victim of justifiable homicide is, in fact, white males. But black males made up a disproportionate number of the deaths. But the report released in March also found that the rate at which blacks are killed by police is declining, they claim. With 4.8 black suspects killed per 1 million in the population in 1998 compared to 8 per million in 1978. The rate for whites changed little. Now, Professor David Harris of the University of Toledo College of Law said, the fact that the African Americans are overrepresented is not surprising. There are more contacts between African Americans and law enforcement on a per capita basis than there are between police and whites when we're talking about an officer-initiated contact. That's going to translate into more potential of this kind of conflict. Harris said, without the details of each shooting, however, it is impossible to know why 35% of suspects killed by police are black, a percentage that is nearly 3 times higher than the rate of blacks over age 13 in the general population. Statistically, blacks are disproportionately more likely to be arrested for violent crime, according to the Department of Justice. The rate of arrest for violent crime per 100,000 people was 213 for whites and 1,022 for blacks in 1998. More elements of this report say that nationwide, from 1976 to 1998, there were 8,578 persons killed by police. They're called suspects. Remember, they're felons. So these that have been killed by police are 8,578. 56% of them are white and 42% of them are black. White officers, by the way, it says, makes up 87% of the nation's police forces. That's a big number. Isn't this the most diverse county or area? It's claimed, one of them, in the country. 87% of law enforcement officers are white. And 82% of the justifiable homicides in 1998 were committed by Caucasian officers. Now, to explain themselves, one officer by the name of Sergeant Smith and another Sam Faulkner, a training specialist for Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy. When you're under stress, decision making is really hampered. Goes further to say, Sergeant Smith out of Ohio, a suspect's race doesn't matter when a gun is pointed at you. The only thing you care about is, am I going to survive the encounter? Okay. Oh, and you shoot to stop the threat. Then they offer the very famous police officer excuse statement. People say, why don't you shoot the gun out of their hand? I'd like to meet the guy that can do that. We're not